I would like to start from there and link this session, today's session, to the previous one by saying that there's a term which is used very often for Dattatreya, and this term is called Avadhut. So there have been numerous rishis, numerous saints and sages in the Hindu pantheon. And you have heard of Brahma rishis and Raj rishis and so on and so forth. But the only saint or a sage or a rishi for whom this term Avadhut is used is Dattatreya. And where it fits in with the previous talk is that an Avadhut is somebody who has transcended or moved above and beyond the bondage of the three gunas. So I'm sure the audience which has been regularly hearing the talks and the people who have attended the previous session would understand that everything that we do is somehow tied up with the gunas and the inherent tendencies that we have for action, for thought, for speech. And Avadhut is somebody who has moved even beyond these gunas. So he's completely in control of everything that he thinks, he speaks, and he does. So his thoughts, speech, and action are all in sync, and everything in his life is completely under his control. That is, a status or a position that I'm sure many of us would like to attain in order to find salvation or liberation from this continuous cycle of birth and death. But of course, it's easier said than done. So we start the session properly today with a description of Dattatreya. You don't really find dogs very positively mentioned in a lot of scriptures. So that was the first thing that I noticed about, because I'm a dog lover, and I'm not sure how many others in the audience are as well. But Dattatreya is one of the only saints I found who's associated with dogs, and not just one. Generally you find there are about 4 dogs around him. And there are different interpretations of this symbolism. But before we move to that, we'll also see if it's clear from the pictures that I've shared on the slide, what else is important in his iconography. So he's generally shown with 3 faces. He has 6 hands, and these hands are holding the weapons of the Trinity of Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh. And you'll notice that the 3 faces also resemble the faces of the 3 gods of the Trinity. So one of the faces here has 3 eyes. In the second picture, one of the main body is shown darkish, bluish in hue, just as Lord Vishnu is shown. The weapons of the gods, the Shankh, Chakra, Trishul, Damaru, and the rosary and the Kamandal that Brahma holds, all of them are here. Dattatreya is also shown very frequently with a cow standing behind him. And this cow is variously interpreted as either Gayatri, the mother of the Vedas, or as Kamdhenu. So in a way, the depiction of Kamdhenu behind Dattatreya shows that he has the power to fulfill any wishes of the devotees. And he, interestingly, out of all the avatars of Lord Vishnu, it's only Krishna and Dattatreya who are shown very commonly associated with cows. The dogs that we mentioned earlier, they are supposed to represent the 4 Vedas. So very interestingly, because dogs are not considered very holy or very clean animals, but still the interpretation is that as loyal as the dogs are, the Vedas or the knowledge is as loyal to Guru Dattatreya. He is, as mentioned earlier, he is considered the foremost or the Adi Guru. So his position is second only to Shiva in that respect. In the scriptural descriptions, Dattatreya is shown as a simple monk. He has in his hands the beads, the rosary, and the kamandal, or he is shown empty-handed, one with the one hand in Abhay Mudra and another one in the Var Mudra. And he has only one face and he has two hands. That is it. That is the general description. And again, very interestingly, the two major Purans that talk about the Dattatreya incarnation are the Bhagavad Puran and the Markandeya Puran. Both of these, they mention Dattatreya as an incarnation of Lord Vishnu and not a syncretic or a composite avatar of the Trinity. So before we go on to the discussions, Dattatreya, the name itself tells the story of his birth. So Datta is something that you give in Dan, and Atreya comes from Atri Rishi. Atri is the father of Dattatreya. So something that was given to Atri as a Dan is Dattatreya. That's the significance of his name. So he is the son of Rishi Atri and Anasuya. A lot of people in Maharashtra perhaps would be aware of the name of Anasuya. And Atri, even though a very accomplished Rishi, somehow is not as popular as, say, Brahma Rishi Vashisht or even Vishwamitra. But he's a very accomplished Rishi. He's one of the Saptarishis, and I've mentioned the names of the other Rishis here, along with Bharadwaj, Gautam, Jamdagni, Kashyap, Vashisht, and Vishwamitra. Atri is one of the Saptarishis. Not just that, Atri is also one of the 10 Manasputras of Brahma, the mind-born sons of Brahma. So Brahma didn't really procreate in a human fashion. He created a lot of beings out of his thoughts. And the first 10, the first, of course, were the 4 Kumars, but we're not going into that. And then came the Manasputras, who were 10 in number. And Atri is one of them. Now, a lot of these sages, they find mention in the Purans or in later literature, but they are not present in the Vedic literature. Now, interestingly, Atri is one of the rare rishis who has been mentioned right from the Vedas to the Purans to the Itihas scriptures. He is the composer of the 5th mandal of Rigved. He is one of the founders of the Vaikhanas Vaishnavism, which is quite popular in the South. In fact, I'm not sure how many people are aware, the Tirupati temple it follows the Vaikhanas Vaishnavism, branch of Vaishnavism. So it's a temple dedicated to Vishnu, but it's based on the Vaikhanas principles. He's the father of, Atri is the father of 4 illustrious children, and we'll come to those further. And in the Ramayana, he met Ram and Sita in his ashram at Chitrakoot. So they have played very small but important role in the journey of various characters. And I'm giving you this background so that we understand, where Dattatreya is coming from. He's the son of such illustrious parents who have met multiple incarnations, who have played a significant, even if small, but significant part in the stories of many other avatars as well. So the story of his birth, as told from the Srimad Bhagavatam is, and you don't have to read the slides, I'll just narrate it in short, was that Brahma, when he created the 10 Manasputras, basically his purpose was to fill the creation with living beings. That was his directive from Lord Vishnu, that you are the creator and you have to create worlds that are suitable for life to exist. And the living beings, the creation of living beings was also a responsibility of Brahma. So Brahma created Manasputras with the desire to populate the world. But most of these Manasputras were being born of Brahma, they were too exalted and they were too, uh, they were self-aware, and they did not want to get entrapped in the entire mess that you get into once you get involved with procreation and having a family, and then you want to provide for the family, and then you want to see your sons and daughters get married, and then the grandsons and granddaughters, and so on and so forth. So most of the rishis, they were very hesitant, and Atri was given Anasuya as his bride, and both of them, they did not really fancy living the life of a householder, but Atri did not want to deny his father Brahma uh, the one thing that he had asked him to do. So Atri and Anasuya, they pray to the Trinity and they ask them for help. They basically do not want to get into the biological process of creation, but they want the God's help to bless them with sons and daughters. So when Atri is praying to the gods, the three gods, they appear and they tell Atri that since you have desired all three of us to be born as you have desired children from all three of us, we shall be born as your children. And accordingly, there were three sons who were born to Atri and Anasuya. From Brahma, there came Soma, who was the moon god, Chandrama. From Lord Vishnu came Dattatreya. And from Lord Shiv came Durvasa Rishi. So Durvasa, again, a lot of people may be aware of his name, especially if you've read the works of Kalidas, the Abhigyan Shakuntalam, and various other stories. If you are in a habit of reading scriptures, he finds mention, and sometimes he finds himself in a tight spot because of his anger. And that's because Durvasa is an incarnation of Lord Shiv. And he is angry just like Rudra. Soma is a Prajapati. He is the god not just of moon, but also of vegetation, of trees, of water bodies. And he is the sort of an incarnation of Brahma. And Dattatreya is the incarnation of Lord Vishnu. That is one story. And the second story that comes from the Markandeya Puran talks about a certain rishi called Kaushik, who tripped over a sage called Mandavya and was cursed to die at sunrise. So Kaushik's wife apparently was a very accomplished Rishika by the name of Sandali, and she cursed the sun not to rise to save the life of her husband. So the entire rhythm of the universe is thrown out of the window because the sun cannot rise and the morning cannot happen. So the gods go to the Trinity again, and the Trinity advises them that since it is a rishi's wife who has directed the sun not to rise, it would be helpful if another rishi's wife can counter this curse, and she can convince Sandali to drop this condition. So the gods go to Anasuya. That's how accomplished she was. Imagine the caliber of Atri and Anasuya, that the gods need to come to them for help. And the gods, the Trinity themselves, are more than happy to be born as their children. So the gods go to Anasuya for help, and she is the one who's able to convince Sandali. And she takes a boon from the gods that her husband will not be killed once the sun rises. And the gods are so grateful that they grant the boon, and she allows the sun to rise. And because of her good deed in saving the universe or the cycle of the universe from collapsing, she is given a boon by the Trinity, where the three gods are born respectively as Soma, as Dattatreya, and as Durvasa. Now, coming to Dattatreya's timeline, or Dattatreya's role in the pantheon, you don't really hear a lot about him. So how is it that, while we have Parshuram and Sri Ram and Sri Krishna and even the other, the Dashavta are so popularly known, how is it that Dattatreya is not so well known? So Dattatreya, first of all, was born way back in the mists of time. He was born in the 10th Mahayog of the Swayambhu Manvantar, which was the first Manvantar. We are currently in the 7th Manvantar of the 51st day of Brahma, fifth of the first day of the 51st year of Brahma. So he was born in the first Manvantar of this day, in the 10th Mahayog. Some scriptures mention that he was born in the Satyug, while others say that he was born in the Treta Yug. But again, he was there in the 10th Mahayog. And he's listed as the 6th incarnation of Lord Vishnu. Now, a lot of people may get confused because we've only heard of the 10 incarnations or the Dashavatar. But in reality, there are hundreds and hundreds of incarnations of Lord Vishnu. They have to be, because he's promised to appear whenever evil rises, and in different forms, in different yugas, in different places. So presumably, if there is life on other planets, he would have appeared there as well in different forms. So the Bhagavad Puran lists 23 or 24 major incarnations of Lord Vishnu, and the Dashavatar have been picked from this same list. But out of the original list of the 24, Dattatreya is the 6th incarnation. As I mentioned earlier, he's an Avadhut. The term is very rarely used for any other rishi. This is a term which is specifically assigned to Dattatreya. And an Avadhut implies somebody who is beyond the ego consciousness, beyond the three gunas, beyond duality, beyond the common worldly concerns, and he acts without consideration for standard social etiquette. So he is at many places, in fact, in many of the prayers or the mantras or the hymns dedicated to Dattatreya, he's described as a Digambara. So Digambara is somebody who is not wearing any clothes, who's clad by sky clad. So if there are any Jain people in the audience, you would know what I'm talking about, because there's a Digambara and the Shvetambara sect. So Digambara is somebody who believes not, he does not believe in social etiquette, as in, covering yourself. They believe in living life as they were born, as the gods have given them whatever form they have received, and that's how they want to live their life. So you see, how this is different from the iconography that we see of Dattatreya. He's referred to at multiple places as an unattached monk, but then there are also stories where he is mentioned to have a consort who is named Anaga. Again, it's a very popular name in Maharashtra, but you don't see it outside. And having lived in Mumbai for a really long time, I can tell you that I've never heard this name outside of Maharashtra, at least in North. So I am basically from Chandigarh, and I'm sitting here in the winter with the temperature being about 5 degrees. And I've never heard of that. I had never heard of Dattatreya before coming to Mumbai. And there was a very small shrine to Dattatreya near my hostel, the medical college where I was studying. And that's the first time I saw his image. And I was quite fascinated because I had never seen this form of God before. And interesting, that's where the enigma of Dattatreya started for me. And I'll take you through all the contradictions that are mentioned about him in various forums. He is also, so a lot of people who know that he was married or he had a consort don't know that he had a son or he had any children, because he was an unattached monk, or he was an avadhut who's beyond the requirements of a regular social family life. But the Mahabharata tells us about the origin of the Shraddh ceremony, and therein is a mention of Nimi, of a rishi called Nimi, who is mentioned clearly as the son of Dattatreya. And Now, some may say that this may be some other Nimi and some other Dattatreya. You know, why does he have to be related to the guy we are talking about, or the, you know, the Dattatreya in question? But it's very clear that it is the same one and the same person, because in the same story, even though Dattatreya does not feature, he does not appear, but Nimi's grandfather Atri comes there and tells Nimi that yes, whatever you have started, this new ritual is sanctified by the scriptures, and this will be known as the Shraddha ceremony. So we know that it is the same person, it is the same Dattatreya, and it is then this Nimi, who's another rishi, is a son of Dattatreya. So I think here, yes, I have the image. So you see two different images now. One as an unattached incarnation of Vishnu, who does not have 3 heads, but he does have 6 hands here in this image. And another image showing him with a goddess who looks very similar to Lakshmi. So this Lakshmi, or this consort, is mentioned as Lakshmi in various incidents as well. She's clearly mentioned as Lakshmi. So that again sort of corroborates that Dattatreya is an incarnation of Vishnu primarily, and whatever associations that he developed with the other 2 gods of the Trinity came about later through the development of his the evolution of this particular deity. Now, a very interesting story that I wanted to share about Anaga is about how she first came into being. She was not a goddess. She was not somebody's, a human, you know, somebody's daughter like Parvati. She was created by Dattatreya himself. So interestingly, there's this story again in the Markandeya Puran, where Dattatreya is accosted by hundreds of munis. And these munis, they know him and they recognize Dattatreya as a foremost rishi and a guru, and they want to become his disciples. And Dattatreya decides to test them. He does not pay any attention to them. He goes to the bank of a lake, and there he creates a woman, a beautiful, gorgeous, voluptuous woman. And his purpose is to test whether the disciples or the would-be disciples are worth taking into you know, his tutelage. So he basically is testing the other monks, the young acolytes, whether they are worthy of being tutored by him. So he creates this woman, and the thought that is going on in his mind is that if they start judging me because I am with a beautiful woman, then I know that they are not worth my consideration. So he emerges out of the water after 100 years of penance, and he emerges with this beautiful woman. The munis do not run away. They do not find it contradictory, because a lot of rishis are supposed to be celibates, but they do not find any problem with him having a wife. So he still decides to test them further, and he creates some intoxicating liquors and wines, and he starts drinking them with his wife. The munis are aghast at what is happening, but they still do not run away. And the scriptures, they mentioned, and I quote, though he was engrossed in drinking spirituous liquor in company with his wife, and though he was rendered impure by addiction to singing, musical instruments, and such like, and also by intercourse with his wife, deeming that the high-souled Muni, when with her, was detached from religious rites, the monks, the other acolytes, did not run away. So interestingly, why I wanted to share this was because, one, this is the direct story of the creation of Anaga. And secondly, it speaks volumes about, you know, the religious life, or the life of so-called religious men. You know, a lot of us believe that, you know, celibacy has, or brahmacharya has been considered a major requirement for spiritual advancement, which is true. A control on all the senses is required. But what Dattatreya was trying to show was that even when you are a rishi or a celibate, it is very easy to slip from the path, as was shown by Vishwamitra in main ka episode. But the challenge is to stay in a domestic setting and still not deviate from the path that you're walking on or that you have chosen. So Dattatreya had his consort with him. He was indulging in some public displays of affection. He was indulging in drinking wine and singing and merrymaking. But that did not mean that he was not serious about his spiritual quest. And it is a very interesting story that I think it sort of contradicts everything that we've heard before. And I have never heard of a story or never come across a story where the rishi has shown or sort of broken all restraints in front of his disciples. But of course, this was a way of Dattatreya to check whether the so-called or the would-be disciples were really worth all the effort or not. So this is the first story of creation of where you find Anaga. And the second story is when the gods were defeated by the demons and they requested Dattatreya's help. So interestingly, again, we've never heard of Dattatreya in context of the Devas and Daityas. We've always heard the Devtas running to Brahma or Shiva or Vishnu. But here is a story that mentions the Devtas running to Dattatreya for help. And Dattatreya tells them to call all the asuras to his ashram. And he tells them that let them bring their armies to my ashram. And the idea was that the asuras, they are so bereft of any control over their senses that the moment they saw Anaga, who was the most beautiful woman because she was created by Dattatreya just for the purpose to show that, he was with a really gorgeous lady, and so she was one of the most enticing women that the Daityas could lay their eyes on. And the idea was to distract them. And the Daityas, as was expected, they captured Anaga and they mounted her in a palki and they ran away with her. So Dattatreya just smiles and he speaks to the gods. You see, Lakshmi is being born on the heads of the Daityas. She has passed beyond the 7 stations and now she will reach another. Again, a very interesting statement here is that when you keep Lakshmi on your head, she will not stay with you. Which means that once you become the servant of Lakshmi or of riches or of material possessions, she will definitely forsake you. So the way to keep Lakshmi is not to run after her, but by making Lakshmi run after you. And he says that Daityas have abducted, a sinless. Anaga, by the way, means sinless. That is the meaning of the Sanskrit word. And what he's basically telling the gods is that they have abducted a sinless woman who's devoted to her husband. So all the powers that they had, they amount to nothing. And now you will be able to defeat them. That is the whole purpose of this episode. But I wanted to share these because these are the 2 episodes where Anaga or Lakshmi as the consort of Dattatreya is very clearly mentioned. And it also gives us an insight into the mind of Dattatreya, of how his teaching methods were so radical and so different from what any of us are probably, we have come across. So any questions? I'll just take a break here. Any questions that have come up or anybody wants to say something?
There is a question, not a question, but Hemu says that I've heard the story that when Parshuram's bow was broken by Lord Ram, he got very angry at that time and was advised to go to Dattatreya. And there he sees a man sitting with dogs around and a woman on his thigh. That time Parshuram takes him as his guru.
Right,
Is that
right.
true? Is it believed?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's very right. That's very true, and I'll come to that episode as well. But here again, it's an echo of the same story where Parshuram is a little surprised to see somebody who's supposed to be guiding him sitting with a woman on his thigh. So it's the same shock value that the story holds, and we'll come to the story, the episode of Parshuram meeting. Dattatreya later. Um, he's there at the crucial moments of a lot of people's lives, and he is still unfortunately not very well known, and that's what we are trying to remedy in this session. So I hope this is helpful. So in who were his gurus? Where did Dattatreya himself learn from? That's again a question that might crop up. So one would assume that being the son of Atri and Anasuya, he would have imbibed a lot of knowledge as a child itself. And some of the scriptures mention that he left home very early in his childhood itself, and he started wandering around. So he did not take any guru, not even his own father, as his guru. And in the Bhagavad Puran, Yadu, who's the father of the Yadav dynasty, in which Sri Krishna is born later, he meets Dattatreya and he asks him about his guru. And the Avadhut replies, "O king, I have taken shelter of 24 gurus, who are the following: the earth, the air, sky, water, fire, moon, sun, pigeon, python, the sea, the moth, the honeybee, an elephant, a honey thief, the deer, the fish, a prostitute called Pingala, the Kurara bird, and a child, and the young girl, a maiden, an arrow maker, a serpent, a spider, and a wasp. My dear king, by studying their activities, I have learned the science of the self." And so the 24 gurus, I think it's fairly easy to find a PDF document on this online. And in the interest of time, I will not go too much. We've already covered 10 of these. So the teachings of Dattatreya have come to us through these conversations that he's had. And an interesting question, one of my friends asked when I told him that I'm doing a session on Dattatreya was, how come I've never heard of him before? And so I think, there are pockets in the country. There are people who have heard of Dattatreya because of the association with a few disciples or avatars that we associate with Dattatreya. In the north, you have the Nath Sampradaya, the Navnath, and the Matsyendranath, Gorakhnath, all these, the Hat yogis, so they consider Dattatreya to be the Adi Guru. And they associate him with Shiva, and they think of him as an incarnation of Shiva. So when we were discussing about, the Trinity, the concept of Dattatreya being the avatar of the Trinity, I think while scriptures mention that he was an avatar of Vishnu, the popular traditions in many ways make him an avatar of Shiva, especially in the Nath Sampradaya. The other famous disciples, or I would say expansions or incarnations of Dattatreya that are considered by the devotees, is Sripad Sri Vallabha. He is he's in a disciplic succession where there is Sri Narasimha Saraswati, there is Swami Samarth. Swami Samarth, I'm sure a lot of people, at least in Maharashtra, would be aware of, and also the association with Dattatreya. So this association comes through Sripad Sri Vallabha and Sri Narasimha Saraswati. And this, I think, has percolated down to some of the masses who are aware of these particular groups or sects, and they may be aware of some of his teachings, but Dattatreya is credited with a lot of teachings which which we would never imagine. You know, he is associated with Patanjali, and he is thought to have taught the Yoga Sutras, the Yam and Niyam, the Ashtanga Yoga, so to say, to Patanjali. He is credited with teaching the Tripura Rahasya to Parshuram. So the story, the question earlier about Parshuram meeting Dattatreya, that is where, you know, the Tripura Rahasya is first mentioned, and it is a tantra, it is a Shakta text, basically. So the Avadhut Gita is one of the other very important teachings of Dattatreya. I think probably the most important one, most significant one, and it's a very short text. It has just 8 chapters. And just like you have the Bhagavad Gita, which is divided in 18 chapters, the Avadhut Gita is a text on very similar concepts. And I'll touch upon a few of those further. But the Avadhut Gita is primarily an Advait Vedanta book. So it promotes Advait Vedanta, whereas the Bhagavad Gita is not very clear on, you know, it is more of a Dvait, and some scholars argue that you can also find Advait concepts in it. But Avadhut Gita is an out and out Advait Vedanta scripture. There's also the Dattatreya Upanishad, which is associated with the Atharva Ved, and there are many other smaller scriptures where Dattatreya and his teachings find mention. So I'll just take you through a few of these teachings. In the Tripura Rahasya, as I said, you know, it is a Shakta oriented scripture. And this is the incident where Parshuram, you know, what has happened is that Parshuram has achieved all that he wanted to in his life. He's killed the Kshatriyas 21 times, and he's, and I think the earlier session we had was on Parshuram, right? So we have discussed this particular incident, or not this particular incident of him meeting Dattatreya, but how and why of Parshuram killing 21 generations of Kshatriyas. But when Parshuram is faced with Lord Ram, he is defeated for the first time in his life, and he's completely dejected. And he is not able to understand what has gone wrong, because he was able to defeat the Kshatriyas multiple times. So he's very dejected. And in that state, he comes across another Avadhut, another yogi, another saint who is roaming around in the forest like a madman. And this guy is called Samvarta. He is the brother of Dev-Guru Brihaspati. And Samvarta tells Parshuram that you have to find Dattatreya. And you have to get your doubts cleared from Dattatreya. And before I go on to some of the teachings, I'm just quoting Swami Vivekananda, who's commented on the Avadhut Gita, and he has said, "Men like the one who wrote this song keep religion alive. They have actually realized they care for nothing, feel nothing done to the body, care not for heat, cold, danger, or anything. They sit still, enjoying the bliss of Atman. And though red hot coals burn the body, they feel them not." So this is what Swami Vivekananda, one of the most celebrated gurus that India has produced, had to say about the Avadhut Gita. So I would again request everybody to go through it. It's a very short book, but it is full of the concepts of Advaita Vedanta. And you have to be comfortable first with the whole idea before you start imbibing what is mentioned in the book. That the Avadhut Gita itself mentions what the Avadhut stands for. And it says that A stands for freedom from the snares of hopes and expectations, pure in the beginning, in the middle, and the end, merged in self-bliss. V stands for the rooting out of all desires after pleasure, subtle or material, and for life in the present as all sufficient. the present being eternity. The, or dh here, is the physical body covered with dirt and dust, but with the mind ever pure and the heart ever still, above contemplation and meditation. T is the unceasing contemplation of the eternal truth and indifference to the activities of the mind and senses. It also bespeaks freedom from egoism and pride. So that is all from me, from the teachings of Dattatreya. And before I end, I would just like to end with a prayer to the God, to the incarnation, to the avatar, to the avadhut, which goes something like this: Dattatreya Hare Krishna Unmat Ananda Dayaka Digambara Mune Bal Pishacha Gyan Sagara Om Dram Dattatreya Namaha. Thank you.